For over 2 decades, Disney's iconic purple signs greeted guests on every single roadway. That is until about 5 years ago when Disney quietly started making them blue instead. And until now, no one has truly done a deep dive into why the purple signs were created to begin with and why Disney made the decision to change them. That is until now. So let's dive into it. Welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, I am Mouselet2, and I'm a civil engineer who loves all things Disney. Being a civil engineer truly is my passion in life. It is the best career for me because I love what I do every single day. And when I talk about it, I think that a lot of people don't know exactly what a civil engineer is. And there's a lot of different types. Some people focus on buildings. Some people focus on bridges. Some people focus on geotechnical engineering and soils. Some people focus on building dams. Some people focus on roads and transportation. And I am one of those people. My job is actually specialized in traffic engineering, which covers a lot of different things. My day-to-day, every day looks totally different. Sometimes I'm analyzing one of the busiest interchanges in the entire United States. Sometimes I'm analyzing a small traffic signal in a rural town. Sometimes I'm designing signs. And that is the topic of today's video, signs. Because today we are talking about the signs at Walt Disney World. And by the end of this video, not only will you know way more about all of this fascinating Disney lore with signs, because trust me, you're going to be shocked at how much there is, you're also going to just kind of know a lot about signs. You will never see the signs on a road the same way after watching this video. Chapter 1, Disney World at the beginning. When Disney was coming to Florida, they had a lot to take on. The land was almost entirely undeveloped. There was a cabin, a dirt road, and pretty much nothing else. And so Disney created a master plan, which they published in 1969, that talked about how exactly they would turn this swampland into the Walt Disney World. And in that 1969 master plan, they say that of the 20 million visitors to Florida during 1968, some 15 million, or 3 out of 4 tourists, came within a 2-hour drive of the Walt Disney World site. Exposure to a potential audience this large and the emphasis placed upon recreation and outdoor entertainment in Florida vacationing are extremely favorable indications of the potential for a successful complex of commercial recreation attractions at Walt Disney World. In addition, 80% of the visitors to Florida traveled by automobile, and the majority did drive through Central Florida. And what that meant was that the roads were going to be very important. And so while Disney was focusing on building their Magic Kingdom theme park and their resort hotels and the Seven Seas Lagoon and the golf courses, they also had to focus on access. Roadways. How would people get to the parks? And so Disney started building their roads. And if you want a deep dive on Disney roads, I have one, and it's really interesting. So go watch that if you want. But today we're focusing on just the signs. Chapter 2, Signs. If you're my sister, Mouselet1, I'm talking to you, feel free to skip this section because Mouselet1 hates when I talk about signs. But to everyone else, this is incredibly important. And honestly, it is really cool, okay? So to start, the sign guidance in the United States of America, it's all standardized across every single state, and it comes from something called the MUTCD, the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And public roads, so any public road in the US, has to conform to this. That's why if you drive through Florida, you drive through Montana, you drive through Hawaii, you see all of the same signs. A stop sign in the United States is a stop sign. It looks different in France, looks different in Brazil, but it looks the same in the US. And there's a lot of different things that make up a sign. The shape, the color, the messaging, the text size, the text font, the border, the arrow size, and even the post of the sign. And the MUTCD, it makes it super simple because everything just comes from a standard. For example, a yellow diamond sign. These are called warning signs. They warn you that something is about to happen, like there's a curve coming, or there's a traffic light approaching, or that the speed of a highway ramp is slower than the speed that you're driving, or that there's a pedestrian crosswalk. And this is just one of many types of signs. Another type, regulatory signs. Usually these signs are white and black and red, things like stop signs, yield signs, one-way signs, signs that tell you the lane use of a road. These are all regulatory signs. Next up, arguably the most important for our story today, guide signs. Guide signs are signs that you probably know as the huge green signs on highways. These are signs that show destinations and directions and distances. Sometimes they'll say an exit number on them. Guide signs don't have to be green. They can also be blue or brown. So the blue signs, that's going to be like a service sign on the highway. And then the brown signs, these are specifically used for points of recreational and cultural interest. They show historic buildings. They show tourist regions, campsites, museums, national parks. And a random fact, they actually started in France in the 1970s. Now, notice that I mentioned the color of all of these signs because these are all standard colors. There's yellow, there's orange on construction signs, white, black, red. All of these things are standard, but there are some colors that are not used at all. They're reserved for future use, like light blue signs. Those are not used anywhere yet. Coral signs, those are also not used. Don't be confused. Pink signs are present sometimes. Coral signs are not. And purple signs. Yes, there is a shade of purple on newer signs for Easy Pass, but that color is still not widespread across the US. Other things you need to know about signs. I promise I am almost done, but these are the last couple of things, okay? Text size and text font. All of this is standard. There is a certain height of text, 15 inches, 12 inches, 18 inches, whatever it is for higher speed roadways. There's also smaller fonts for lower speed roadways, 4 inches, 6 inches, 8 inches, 10 inches. There's also different fonts. There is really only one font that is used on highway signs. I mean, technically there's two fonts, but there really only should be one font in my opinion. If you want a sign hot take, that's it. But these fonts are very specifically designed to be very, very readable. They don't have any curves or crosses. They're sans serif and they're simple and they're easy to see. There are different boldnesses associated with these signs, but again, they're very straightforward and simple. And then on a guide sign, the text is always white. It is always white. You can see it with the contrast. That is a standard. Black text is also used on other signs like warning and regulatory signs. And then even the arrows on signs are standard, okay? You get the deal. Signs follow standards. In a world of being a traffic engineer like me, it is so helpful to have standards because we get to just follow something and it's clear and it's easy to understand and it makes things uniform across the entire country. Chapter 3, Disney's original signs. So what did Disney do with the signs early on? Well, let's start with the signs on World Drive because to be honest, this was one of the only roadways on property at the time. World Drive ran north-south from 192 all the way up to the Magic Kingdom. There weren't a lot of exits because there weren't a lot of places you could go at the time. World Drive is described in the 1969 annual shareholder report. The main entrance will be linked to the Vacation Kingdom and its 14,000 car parking lot via a 4.7-mile 4-lane parkway to be constructed by Walt Disney World Company. This entire program, along with an extensive roadway beautification program, will be completed before the opening of the amusement theme park. So, extensive roadway beautification program. You're probably thinking, that's where the purple signs came in. That makes perfect sense. No, they did not do that. They did have, and they do have, beautiful roadways, but what this really meant was having manicured lawns and garden areas as you drive by, not overgrown grass, there's no litter, there's no trash. You don't ever see a pothole at Disney, ever, literally ever. But no, the only specialized component of this beautification program was adding topiaries along the drive. That was really all you saw. The signs, they weren't anything special. And that was intentional. Because you have to remember, Disney was creating a new path. They were doing something that wasn't being done anywhere else in the United States. And they weren't just supposed to be another Disneyland, another theme park. They had Epcot coming, the city of the future. They had an airport that could potentially come. They had an industrial park. This was a place that a lot of people would drive to, and they were going to follow the example of other places that a lot of people drive to, like national parks. So Disney put in brown signs for tourists. That was the sign that people were used to seeing all over the United States. There were not that many other tourist destinations along this area, so a brown sign that said Walt Disney World, that was really all they needed. And in fact, they did not have the archways that you might think of at the property gates. Instead, they just had more brown signs. And that is what existed from 1971 up until the early 1990s. Just basic brown signs. But over those 2 decades, things changed pretty significantly. The Orlando area especially, a huge boom. Housing, jobs, tourists, other theme parks came to town, other tourist attractions came to town. Soon there were tourist attractions everywhere. Disney too had developed a lot. They had at the start only a handful of resorts, but eventually in the 1980s when Michael Eisner came in, moderate resorts came and value resorts were coming. There was so much more to Disney. Chapter 4, The Birth of the Purple Sign. Now it is the early 1990s, and Disney is preparing for something very special. Their biggest celebration at Walt Disney World to date, the 25th anniversary in 1996. And with Michael Eisner at the helm, I love you, Eisner, and I don't care what anyone says, they decided to make some changes. One of them was adding a gateway. That way, when guests entered the Disney property, they would know that they were entering a magical special place. This picture here comes from an old magazine in 1995-1996 when Disney was actually talking about and planning this gateway arch. But not only that, Disney wanted that iconic Disney look to extend all through property. They wanted to brand it, and so they hired a firm. Sussman Praja, the same team that was responsible for the look of the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics, to create a unique visual identity for the property's roadways. And that they did. The Sussman Praja firm, and I'm going to call that SP, they have an entire webpage on their website to this day, as they should, about all of the work that they did for this. So what does it say? How do they describe this project? Here's what they said. Walt Disney World encompasses an area larger than the city of San Francisco. All visitors arrive by highway or freeway. SP's task was to develop a vehicular signing system that would be unique in spirit, clean, easy to follow, and capable of being expanded as the area continues to grow. Let's break that down, shall we? Unique in spirit. Disney wanted to look different. They didn't want people to think they were just driving on any road in Florida. When you got onto property, they wanted you to know you're in Disney. So it didn't make sense to use a green guide sign. These signs are all over the United States. Everyone would just think that they were in some random place. They needed to use something that was unique in spirit. Now remember, going back to my sign section, we talked about a couple of colors that were available and still are today. Light blue, coral, purple. These were some options that would distinctly set Disney apart. And so the design firm generated this color scheme. And it was uniquely Disney, but it also kept the public safe. And that's a part that I feel like a lot of people don't totally recognize. So let's start here. The route shields and the interstate shields. So interstate shields are blue. That's the color that they are all across the United States of America. US route shields and state route shields, those are white and black. And so this was kept the same. They wanted people to know how to get to these places. It wouldn't make sense to make a shield for 192 green. It would just confuse people. So they didn't change anything with this. And that was absolutely the right choice. They did the same thing with the stop signs. They kept the stop signs red. Why would they make a blue stop sign? People might miss it. It's just better for safety to keep it consistent. And then again, the same thing with the warning signs. If they're trying to warn someone that something is happening, they want to make sure that people recognize that they're being warned. And people would recognize that by having it be yellow. So they kept the warning signs the same. Now the guide signs, the signs that they had on property that were brown, well, they didn't do that. They didn't do green. Instead, they had two different color schemes. Purple and the secondary blue. These signs would also have touches of yellow and touches of red, again, uniquely setting them apart and also a little tie-in to Mickey. But Mouselet too, if they wanted to do Mickey Mouse, they should have done a black sign with red and yellow because Mickey has all sorts of black on him. That is a good point, and there's a reason that they didn't do it. And the reason is that a full black sign doesn't exist and shouldn't exist. A black sign at nighttime would be close to invisible. Already darker signs can be challenging to see if they don't have the same retro reflectivity that they had when they were created. Signs fade over time, they have to be replaced, they get dirty, whatever it is. A black sign, no matter how hard you tried to make it reflective, would be really hard to see. The purple was unique, and yes, it did have a little tie-in to Mickey with the red and the yellow. The SP design firm even went so far to create special custom arrows. Again, something different than what people would see every day out on the road. And they also found cool opportunities to include Mickey's silhouette on certain types of signs. And then one of the coolest things, the signposts. If you go out and look at any sign around you, if you live in the United States, that is, you're going to see a sign that's probably on something called a P5 post. It's a steel post. It could be a square post. It could be a U-channel post. Those are some technical words, but it's basically a metal post. There might be two still metal posts. These are a couple of $100s each. It kind of varies, anywhere between like $200 to $400. That's expensive, right? Disney didn't use these posts. They're plain. They wanted something more special. And so they created these custom branded posts. If a regular post costs $200, this is at least $300, $400, $500 that Disney is doing to create these special custom signposts. And that's just a guess, but it does show that Disney really, really was investing in creating this unique identity. And part of that was the signs. The signs truly were doing that. The posts truly were doing that. Now, that was just one thing that the SP firm said, right? They said unique in spirit. That's a piece of it. But they said some other things too. For example, clean. And by that, they mean legible, easy to read. And so when we look at the signs that they actually used, we can see that they chose a font that's pretty close to what you see out there on actual interstates. There was no confusing cursive. They didn't use the iconic Disney font, even though that would have been iconic. It would have been really hard to read. So they used a standard sans serif font. They also made sure to have the right contrast, like they didn't use a green font on a purple sign, for example. That would be really, really hard to see. Another thing the SP firm said, easy to follow. And that was very, very interesting. And their webpage says more about how they did that. You know, on a standard highway, you have green signs that usually have destinations and exit numbers on them. If you're exiting to a local road, say, it might say Hartford Avenue. If you're exiting to another route or an interstate, it might say that. Sometimes it just says town names. But to Disney, they came up with a slightly different approach. What they did was they divided the property into major districts. Magic Kingdom was one, Fort Wilderness another, Epcot, MGM, and then the Disney World Village, which is now what Disney Springs is. And they developed a hierarchy of signs that first led visitors to a specific district and then to a distinct destination. And in the end of 1996, so this has changed even since then, there were 1,000 signs, including large freeway signs, major and minor road directionals, regulatory signs, gateway signs, even bus graphics and signs. And all of this was capable of being expanded in the future. Also worth noting, this was implemented at Disneyland Paris or Euro Disney at the time. This again was Disney trying to bring their iconic branding, set themselves apart as a uniquely Disney place. I'm heading back to Disneyland Paris for the 6th time. I love Disneyland Paris. I'll be there in just a couple of months. You can expect a deep dive coming soon. But for now, back to signs. Chapter 5. Why did they change it? So why on earth did Disney change the signs? Why? Well, let's talk about it, because there's a couple of different theories that people have. The first theory that I hear pretty often is that the blue sign is cheaper for Disney to buy than the purple sign. Well, I can see why people would think this. The purple sign isn't used anywhere else in the US, and blue signs are. So if Disney could just buy the blue sign, it's already being made, it's cheaper. That's actually not the case. It potentially could be the case if Disney was using the standard blue signs that the, federal highway does, but they aren't. They're using their own special shade of blue. So that's actually not benefiting them in any way. Another theory, people said the purple signs faded far too quickly and that the blue signs would be better in the Florida sun. Again, this is really not the case. All signs do fade. Purple signs fade, blue signs fade, green signs fade, brown signs fade. All the signs fade. They have certain things that build up against the sun. Florida itself is super bright. So yes, signs do fade. But again, purple signs, blue signs, there's just not that much of a difference. The third theory, that is the one that I believe myself and I think is the most valid of all of the theories. And that was, remember, why did Disney introduce the purple signs to begin with? Well, they did it for the 25th anniversary, right? It was a way to celebrate this huge monumental thing. And for the 25th anniversary, it wasn't just signs that they did on property. I mean, they did the birthday cake castle. They went all out. Okay, well, what came about right when they started putting these blue signs in? Disney's 50th anniversary. And what was the color scheme of the 50th anniversary? Blue and yellow. And so what people say is that approaching the 50th anniversary, Disney wanted to do something special and something new. And so they were going to swap out all of the purple signs on property to become blue and yellow. They swapped out the gateway, for example, when you entered Disney to have a special 50th anniversary look, and the signs were going to follow suit. And they might have been planning this type of activity, getting the signs designed, getting them planned to be fabricated, but then COVID hit. They put a pause on all of this. By the time the 50th anniversary came around in October of 2021, they didn't want to spend the money and they didn't have all of the signs. There were just a lot of delays, and so they didn't end up doing this entire project. They did end up doing some of it though. The biggest one that I just immediately know that is there was the sign they added for the Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel, which is now closed. They swapped out all of the signs up there, likely because they needed a new sign to be created for the Galactic Star Cruiser. And so those signs are blue, when the rest of the signs around there are purple. They also swapped out a sign near Animal Kingdom to blue. I don't know why, because it says the exact same messaging. It's possible that that's one of the signs they had fabricated, and so they decided to swap it. Chapter 6, Where Are We Today? So where are we today? Well, today on Disney World property, we see a really odd mismatch of signs. We see a bunch of the classic purple signs, which are beautiful and I love them. Then we see some of the blue signs, but not that many. And then Disney is also throwing in a third type of sign. They're doing full matrix color digital signs, literally full digital signs. I feel like most commonly you see these at like airports. You almost can't tell that this here is a digital sign, except for the fact that the camera from Street View kind of carries it a little bit weird. But yes, this is a digital sign. The benefit here is that they can swap out the actual messaging on the sign if they wanted to. That's why it's used at like airports, parking garages. It's used over by Disney Springs too. In this case, this message would never really change, so I'm not sure why they would have implemented this digital sign other than maybe to test it. Additionally, digital signs just require more infrastructure. They have to have some sort of power, whether that's connected to a power source or it uses solar. They have to have power in some way to actually be able to turn on. So there's added complexity to these that these general static signs don't have. So what is the plan long term? I don't know what the plan is long term. If they wanted to ask me for my opinion as a civil engineer who loves all things signs, I would tell them, oh my God, keep the purple signs. They're iconic. They're so special to Disney. We don't need the blue signs. Had they done it for the 50th, I might have sort of been on board, but now we just have a weird mix and I'm just back to the purple. What will they actually do? I would say they will be putting in blue signs. And I'm sorry to the people who don't want to hear that. It's going to be slow. It's going to be long. They likely will take a purple sign out once it needs maintenance or needs to be replaced, and they'll put a blue sign in its place. And eventually, finally, at some point, we will see all of the signs replaced from purple to blue. There's a chance that they'll do all of a road, a corridor. Maybe they do all of World Drive at one point, possibly, but it's not totally an investment they need to be making because the purple signs are fine and there's no special celebration going on. So right now, it's just sort of sitting in limbo. Anyway, that is all I have for you today. This was such a fun topic for me to cover because, again, I think I'm one of the only people in the world who loves all things signs and all things Disney. If you like this video, please be sure to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and I will see you all next week for another Mouselets Monday. Bye!